A story is only as good as its villain, or something like that, right? We're talking The Acolyte this week, ahead of its premiere coming up in about a week from now, less than a week from now on Disney+, and deep diving into Sith lore, more so than ever before. I'll have details on that. We have listener feedback this week, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. And as always, I know you like science fiction, or you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. If you want to support my nerd world and the Star Wars podcast, you can check out the EMBARK science fiction space opera series, available on Amazon.com. I'll have more details later on in this week's episode.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My Nerd Road.
Just let it in.
And welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice. Star Wars show, Star Wars the podcast. It's a podcast and a show where we talk about Star Wars. Thank you so much for checking out the episode. I definitely appreciate it. I hope you enjoy listening as much as I do recording and talking about Star Wars. Now, the news right now is all surrounding The Acolyte. I have an article here that I want to share with you from Den of Geek as the hype builds for this new entry into the live-action streaming canon of Star Wars lore. Now, there's been other Star Wars news swirling around, and I want to direct you over to YouTube. There is a YouTuber that's put out an extensive 4-hour-long deep dive, doing a lot of deep dives on the show this week, into the failed Star Wars hotel, and it's going viral. Jenny Nicholson is no stranger to YouTube. She's been posting YouTube videos for years, but she also worked for Disney and has put together an amazing video documentary she's produced on her own, detailing the failure that is the Galactic Star Cruiser at Walt Disney World. An idea when it started that sounded, I know, amazing to me, but with the $6,000 price tag for a two-night stay to get into this deep dive immersive environment, for it to go and fail, for it to succeed, everything had to go right. For it to fail, you just had to have a few things go wrong. And in this case, it was a lot of small things that ended up leading to the failure of this Disneyland hotel and immersive experience. So when you got an opportunity and have some time to kill, I definitely would go and check out Jenny Nicholson's video up on YouTube. Just search Jenny Nicholson and Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser. There's a few articles that are out relating to it, including CNN picked up on this as well. And there's takeaways from the failure of the Galactic Star Cruiser that I think also, in no small part, apply to some of the frustrations, not just around Star Wars and Disney, but the other content that Disney has gone and created. Bob Iger, who took over for Bob Chapek after he had retired as CEO of Disney, has taken back over, as I mentioned, Disney, and he has said that they pumped out too much content, that they did quantity over quality, and unfortunately it showed, and they were going to be pulling back on the Star Wars content on this Disney Plus streaming platform. Now, we're still getting Ahsoka Season 2, thank goodness. We're still getting potentially a Season 4 of The Mandalorian, even though there is a lot of discussion around whether or not Season 4 is going to be rolled into The Mandalorian and Grogu movie, which will come out in May of 2027. We also have the Skeleton Crew series that's coming out later this year. Some merchandise has released with some images of the I'd say children, but I think they're teenagers. The young cast of this show, of which I'm excited about. I'm looking at the CNN article right now, though, relating to the Galactic Star Cruiser. I'll just share with you a couple of points because they talk about Nicholson's video. She's known for her commentary on various corners of fan culture. Some of her most popular videos cover movies like The Vampire Diaries, Pirates of the Caribbean, and installments of the Star Wars franchise. None of them are nearly as long as the spectacular failure of the Star Wars Hotel. Over the course of 20 chapters, Nicholson details her 2022 stay at the Galactic Star Cruiser. I'm sorry, I mistakenly said she worked there. The tale, likely familiar to Disney and Star Wars fans, many of whom have heard about the high-dollar concept hotel and its closure in 2023. Nicholson says she's paid more than $6,000 for the two-night stay, which was supposed to resemble a Star Wars-style spaceship called the Halcyon. The big draw of the hotel lay in what Disney marketing called an immersive, customizable Star Wars experience that Nicholson equated to live-action role-playing or live-action role-playing. Guests were encouraged to dress up through a combination of live experiences with cast members and choices made in a special app. They were guided through a 3-day-long Star Wars storyline, complete with a full itinerary and, if played to its full extent, very little downtime. With Disney-esque details like working lightsabers, colorful themed food, an experience that was supposed to feel like a landlocked cruise with all the entertainment happening on board the ship, in reality, a large, ultra-secure, windowless building near Walt Disney's Epcot Resort is where this resided. Nicholson's experience squared with some of the more critical reviews of the hotel: cramped rooms, inconsistent experiences with technology, and a general sense of confusion as to the purpose or audience of venture. She also mentioned at length some of the things that she enjoyed: cast member performances and details in the ship's hotel interior. Little of this is new information. Still, Nicholson's video has netted more than 2 million views in 2 days, and has already wormed its way into the social media pipeline of memes and references as well. So, I haven't had a chance to watch it in its entirety, but if you're interested and have some time to kill to see how something with the Star Wars name could fail in such just a spectacular fashion, definitely go and check this out. It's worth a watch.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
I always get excited for new Star Wars content, especially Star Wars content that is being placed in the canon of Star Wars. Not unlike, the Lego Star Wars shows that get released, or the Star Wars Visions. I ultimately like my Star Wars to be live action. Ultimately, I like my Star Wars to be live action on the big screen, but I'll take it on the small screen as well. And I've mentioned many times, I was very excited. One of the shows that I was most excited about was The Acolyte when it was first announced. That excitement has ebbed and flowed, kind of like an EKG, over the course of the past few years as it's been created and news has come out. As we are staring at less than 2 weeks from the debut of the first 2 episodes of The Acolyte, I'm excited, cautiously optimistic. Right now, there's very little news beyond what I mentioned of the hotel closure of the Galactic Star Cruiser. It's all focused right now on The Acolyte, and we've been getting some 30-second promo spots. We received one sort of extended 1-minute-plus clip of a non-lightsaber battle taking place between a Jedi and the antagonist in the show. From what I've seen of the footage so far, I'm excited. There's this new almost Knights of Ren helmeted character that looks incredibly interesting. I'm not sold on the production value, much like the other Star Wars plus Disney content that we've received, and or being the standout in terms of great production. But I'm willing to look past that. If the story's good, because Ahsoka's production was along the same lines as The Mandalorian, and really it was just Kenobi that to me really took it down a notch. This article here that I wanted to share with you on the show this week from Den of Geek, though, has me excited once again for the dark side aspect of what the Acolyte can offer, which was what drew me to and got me most excited when it was first announced. You may or may not know, but in the original Star Wars film, the Sith were never mentioned. There was a deleted scene in Star Wars A New Hope where the Sith were mentioned, but that was ultimately removed before the movie hit the big screen. But the idea of learning more about the Sith or seeing a story that gives the perspective of the Sith and the dark side I've always found interesting. And apparently, according to this article, The Acolyte is the deepest dive into Sith canon ever. You go back to Star Wars Episode 1, at last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have revenge. The words of Darth Maul talking with Palpatine in Episode 1. 25 years after that prequel film set the stage for the rise of Palpatine and Vader, the new live-action Acolyte will show us the origin of the Sith plan to destroy the Jedi once and for all. The story actually begins 100 years before the prequel trilogy, and as we head into the final weeks before the debut, and we'll actually get some reviews of The Acolyte, because people are seeing previews of it coming up on Friday as I record this on Thursday. Heading up the Disney Plus show, billed as a mystery thriller, a genre first for a space fantasy franchise in live action, showrunner Leslie Headland, the creator of the the Netflix series Russian Doll, about a woman stuck in a messy time loop that kills her each and every go-round. The protagonist of The Acolyte, a character named May, is played by rising star Amanda Lestenberg. Former Padawan turned warrior trapped in a different kind of loop, the oldest one in the galaxy far, far away, the never-ending war between the light and dark side forces. That eternal struggle is baked into the show's protagonist, or antagonist for that matter. The character of May was rooted in the very early idea I had, even before we had her character, which was, do the Jedi have a monopoly on the Force? Headland explains to Den of Geek magazine, or are the Force users that exist in the galaxy who are either dealt with or disposed of? Or do they have to keep themselves hidden? Are there Force users that exist in the galaxy who are either dealt with or disposed of, or do they have to keep themselves hidden? Are they good guys or are they bad guys? We know very little about May. We see her trying to kill Carrie-Anne Moss, Jedi Master Indara, with a dagger. It's unclear whether she's actually a Sith acolyte in question. I believe she is. Headland coyly describes the character's motivations as personal. What we know for sure about May is that she was trained by Jedi Master Sol, played by Lee Jung-jae, until she left the Order, and that she's now tied up in a murder investigation led by Sol and his apprentice, a half-alien, half-human named Jeki Lon. This was played by Logan's Daphne Keane, now grown up. And that all points eventually converge on the Sith. While this is definitely not the first time we've seen secret Sith machinations against the Jedi on screen, in terms of live action, The Acolyte takes the deepest dive into the mythos ever. Headland describes the series as an expansion of Sith ideology. What was it about the bad guys that captivated Headland so much as to pitch an entire show about them? It all goes back to unanswered questions for The Phantom Menace. And it'll be interesting to see how this ties into the Force Jedi origin story, which has, from what I hear, a working title of Jedi Prime, if I'm not mistaken. And that came courtesy of SFX Magazine in their coverage of The Acolyte. Producer Simon Emanuel had made mention of James Mangold and the Dawn of the Jedi era movie, and the title being Jedi Prime. Now, that could just be a working title at this point in time. But we did hear talk that these films would be tying together. This Jedi origin story set thousands upon thousands of years prior to even the events of the Acolyte. And so if we're getting this sort of origin, if you will, or expansion of Sith ideology and the deepest dive into it, I imagine that these stories via the story group are sort of being crafted in tandem with one another. There are certain things that happened in the prequels about the Sith and about Darth Maul and the Jedi's understanding of them that I found intriguing, Hedlund said. Qui-Gon on Tatooine immediately knows that Darth Maul is a Sith from fighting him and then reports to the Jedi that to the Jedi Council. Yoda knows about the rule of two, and he says always a master and an apprentice. So while they're considered extinct, there was a little bit of knowledge about the Sith that I felt would not have come from ancient history. To me, it felt like, to know that information that quickly, it would have had to have been dealt with and had to have been within the last 100 years. Now, that's a jaw-dropping observation for any lifelong Star Wars fan, who clearly has thought deeply about the movies and the established lore inspired by the show. Let's be clear, though, chatting with Hedlund about Star Wars is delightful. She takes her time with each answer and is as precise as a targeting computer when digging up the most obscure references to canon and old Legends lore. In fact, fans tuning into the show this June should expect quite a few nods to deep-cut lore from the franchise past. I really toyed with utilizing Darth Bane or mentioning Bane. We do not do it in the first season, but it is obviously the legacy of these practitioners of the dark side, Hedlund says with a laugh. When asked whether the show will finally see a live-action debut of Palpatine and Maul's Sith forefather, Darth Bane. While we don't get into that particular lore, there were some things in Legends that I wanted to drag out because I felt they were really interesting. Not only to the storyline, but to a fan as myself. I thought, well, I'd love to do that. One particularly exciting reference was the beloved 2004 video game Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lord. Specifically, the main villain, Darth Traya, really stuck out to me as an inspiration, Hedlund says. Like the non-canon Knights of the Old Republic, the Acolyte isn't just technically a prequel to the prequel movies, but also the first live-action series, as we've talked about on the show, set during the High Republic era of Star Wars, a time period of relative peace for the galaxy and the Golden Age for the Jedi Order. There were two reasons I wanted to set it in that particular time period that far away from the prequels. One, I didn't want to mess with any canon, Hedlund says. The other thing that I loved about this period was the lack of legacy characters. I was too nervous to take them on. But also, I felt like we've seen a lot of that. The High Republic felt like a sandbox that I could easily jump into. Now, this would push back on what I expected. They say don't expect to see Yoda running around in the series, although High Republic fans will recognize one of the characters from the book, Vanessa Rowe, played by Hedlund's wife, Rebecca Henderson. In the book, she's a teenager still learning the ways of the Jedi, but decades later in The Acolyte, Vanessa is a full-fledged Jedi Master. She gives you a sense of how the Jedi have really changed, Hedlund says. They're still the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy, but there's stuff on the horizon. The Acolyte shows the galaxy on the cusp of a vibe shift at the very end of the High Republic era. The corruption that will eventually see the Sith infiltrate the Galactic Senate in the Phantom Menace. We know there's at least one Sith Lord in the 8-episode first season, but we don't know who is under that creepy, toothy helmet teased in the show's trailer. This is a point in the Star Wars timeline when the Jedi definitely have the upper hand, a setup that felt ripe for storytelling. In live action, you haven't really seen the Sith as underdogs. Relating to this individual, people are speculating, is it Darth Plagueis the Wise, the master who taught to Palpatine everything he knows, or someone we haven't met before? The dark side still clouds everything, but we do see this powerful villain single-handedly take on a whole group of Jedi Knights, including Master Soul, and completely blow them away with the Force. He is no underdog as he ignites his red-bladed lightsaber, ready to show his adversaries that they have seriously underestimated the Sith and the Jedi are in trouble. So, we can all look forward to one more episode of this podcast next week before we actually get to those first 2 episodes of The Acolyte. And I really hope that it ends up, sort of turning, I don't want to say turning things around. I just hope it's a really good show. I can't express how much I love the Ahsoka show. So I hope that it lives up to the hype and it does Star Wars well. As always, I'd love to hear from you, TalkShowNerd at gmail.com or leave a comment up on YouTube.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, let's get to your listener feedback this week. Ray 2017 writes, the article that discusses The Last Jedi being crowned the most watched Star Wars Disney Plus show came before the news about The Phantom Menace taking over the spot. Either way, they both earned the title because they were both divisive upon first impressions. The only difference now is it feels easier to talk about The Phantom Menace and shamelessly loving it than The Last Jedi even after 6 years. Perhaps that might change in a decade from now. You know, The Last Jedi, and I've said a ton of things about The Last Jedi, but I had the poster up, and I feel myself drawn to that movie, even though I've seen it just, a ton of times. I just feel myself drawn to that film. I really do love it. And again, I love The Rise of Skywalker, but for completely different reasons. They're much different viewing experiences, in my opinion. All right, let's go and hear from JR, who says, I was watching F1 today, and I was reminded of Ted Kravitz's Tire Chat, and wondering if you've ever done a ship chat. As long as I've heard your podcast, I can't remember a specific ship chat. After catching up in your episodes since May 4th, I was inspired to see if my subscription to Disney Plus, and it still worked. Yay for me. Watching the 6 episodes of Empire Tales and starting Jedi Tales, I saw the ship that made me think of asking you about ships. I'd like to imagine the tech behind any ship in the canon because we don't get too much tech detail while watching the content. I prefer hearing from you versus searching the internet. Typically, I imagine that ships are gravity lifted and engine thrusted to move forward and steer. I look at the Jedi ship with which Dooku and Windu's and Mace Windu and their Jedi ship in Episode 2, how they move their wings from aligned perpendicular to landing with the wings horizontal. I get that they won't be able to land otherwise. I don't get what the purpose of those wings serve if they're not for atmospheric flight. Do they hold fuel? What are your thoughts? And I believe that's the same ship that they use. That's Ahsoka's ship. I'm pretty sure. The T6? I don't have it in front of me. I do have many of the illustrated guides, which really do get into the details of those ships. And I will try to track it down, even though I didn't for this podcast, to find out exactly what the purpose of those wings serve. Listen, all these ships have technical specs to them. They serve a purpose. I just don't know what it is, but I will find out. As a matter of fact, all right, so I did a quick Google search. I have not found an exact explanation for the T6 shuttle's wings rotating, apart from what you mentioned in your email, that it is for ease of docking and or landing. You'd probably have to get into one of the technical manuals to explain further. That ship is the ship that Dooku and Windu use. Been around for a long time, was usually used for diplomatic purposes, even though Ahsoka went and retrofit it with more weaponry, which is the one that we see in Ahsoka. Getting back to the email, maybe you're like me and just appreciate a cool ship, but some of the moving parts seem to be a bit just for show, i.e. the Millennium Falcon is a cargo ship, but where the heck does the cargo go? You have been to Disney. Have you walked through it? I have not been to Galaxy's Edge yet. What was the purpose before Han inspired me to name my 1994 white Corolla after it? Hear me, baby, hold together. There is no cargo area in my humble opinion. Please opine. So we know that the mandibles at the front of the Millennium Falcon, they used to hold an escape pod, but they also are supposed to be to carry cargo. So I think a part of it was that the mandibles in front, when they don't have the escape pod, those hold the cargo itself, and that those front mandibles also would serve as a cargo hold. Now, we also know that the rear of the Millennium Falcon does have escape pods and extra spacing that could also serve to go and ship cargo, not to mention the fact that they have the hidden compartments underneath the flooring of the level, the single level, where they hid from the Empire both in A New Hope and in The Force Awakens. Lastly, he talks about, do you find the Star Wars shows are always dark on streaming when on the streaming TV screen? Says he's been dealing with several issues. I think it's probably your TV, JR, because I haven't had any issues at all with the darkness of the Star Wars shows on my TV. So you may want to check out your brightness settings or potentially settings inside of the app in and of itself. Love your shows. Enjoy your Star Wars, JR. Thank you, JR. I appreciate the feedback and the email and the kind words as well. All right, listen, that wraps up the show for this week. We'll have one more episode next week, sharing any Star Wars news that takes place between now and then, heading into the 2-episode premiere of The Acolyte. I'm very excited. If this is one of your first times listening to the Star Wars Show podcast and you like to read science fiction, I hope you take the opportunity and a moment to head on over to Amazon.com. I've written a 7-book science fiction series. It's called EMBARK. It is a space opera. Takes place on Earth starting in 2172, and then it moves into an epic space opera about Earth humanity having to go and colonize distant worlds. The description of Book 1 is as follows. Katha's father died 1 year ago. Yesterday, he gave her the key to saving humanity. She just doesn't know it yet. With interstellar travel possible, pilots are the future, and Katha Morrow trained to be the best. I'm actually switching over to a newer description that I have for the show. I'm going to my Amazon page for it. I forgot to transfer it over. Let me back up here. With interstellar travel possible, pilots are the future, and since her father's mysterious passing, Katha Morrow has relentlessly trained to be the best. But when an industrial accident sets off an apocalyptic chain of events, she'll need more than her skills to survive. Meanwhile, Taft Guardia picked the right day to upgrade his ship when Katha arrived, needing his help investigating a cryptic message she suddenly received. As a tyrannical enemy emerges to ruthlessly exploit the disaster, Katha and Taft discover what may be the only chance of ending the conflict. On the run across the galaxy, Taft gathers a ragtag squadron to join the fight, while Katha must solve the mystery of what her father left behind if there's any hope of saving Earth's evacuees before it's too late. Don't miss out on this fast-paced and action-packed epic science fiction adventure series. 7 books in all, available in ebook, Kindle Unlimited, hardcover, paperback, and audiobook. Just go to Amazon.com and search for EMBARK, written by me, Jon Justice. All right, we'll be back again next week. I hope wherever you are, you're happy, you're healthy, you're safe. God bless. I'll talk to you then. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.